said that people ask kids' response was, well, you don't ask them how you get a store.
Greetings and welcome. This is Lansing Online News Radio on LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I am Bonnie Buckaroo, and I am soon to be joined by my co-host Bill Castaner, who dashes in every week from the control room next door. And it's here just in time, even though tonight I'm surprised it's pretty too solid.
Oh, yeah. I know why people report it.
Yeah. We also know that, unfortunately for us, the good news for most people is that it is both Inauguration Day and Martin Luther King's birthday, but that also means that they lock LCC up tight as a drum. So when we got here tonight, all the doors were locked and we got to stand outside for a while, so that's always exciting. It's a lot better to do that in the middle of the summer than it's about to.
Pleasant then. It's pretty quiet downtown Lansing and LCC now.
It sure does. I always get the clue when I can find parking space. That's always my first indication that, that's right, it's a holiday. But I hear you have been watching what's been happening with sugar books. There's the blogger Nick who blogs under the name Nick and Live all the time. You keep track of the book industry in Michigan. And there really has been a lot of upset with the sugar bookstore at downtown Grand Rapids.
Right, it's starting to close. It will be closed very soon. It's 5 years old. That still leaves 2 shooters though in Grand Rapids and 2 more in Lansing. But the downtown one is seen as sort of a hope helping resurrect downtown Grand Rapids, which everybody thinks is booming. But it's only booming at certain times. At night and on weekends, unless there's an event, one of the very panhandle or unless something's going on downtown, it's really quiet. Kind of looks like Lansing. There's no good. And they finally decided, the 2 owners, Bill and Cecilia, that even though they were making a small profit, they decided it would be better, money better spent doing something else.
The level of management
It was draining. They had 12 employees. They were going to reassign, so they were losing their job. But it also came, as you know, and we've talked a lot about it, came during a time when the book industry was becoming seriously depressed. All the bestsellers really have moved to Kindle.
Right.
That's where the big deal is. Really hurting the book industry. You used to buy those at the store.
Well, you said the other day that it appears the ebooks have topped out.
They have
16%.
16%. They showed no growth at Christmas this year.
But that probably suggests that 16% shows the profit margin of the profit.
And they shade the profit margin, the real profit.
Yeah.
When you sell 550 of a single book as a bestseller, those books have really moved to the profit. Janet Ivanovich.
We've seen how much bookstores have changed it because Schuler's is now a sort of multi-purpose store. A lot of gifts, they're selling news, anything that they can.
Right, and Schuler's has gone into the used book business. They are a full-service used bookstore.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Sure is, and of course used CDs. If you look closely in any bookstore, even Barnes and Noble, half of it is a coffee shop.
That new model of using it. It was kind of the Starbucks place to hang out and go to a restaurant, have coffee, browse the books, and sort of meet people out. The book part of it is not as big as the portion.
No, and especially in downtowns. Michigan does not have a major downtown bookstore.
Is that right?
Wow. A full service bookstore, selling used and new books.
Huh. So they'll stick with the Billsburg and with the businesses that they have.
Right, 28th Street, Alpine, Eastwood Town Center.
Well, I'm certainly used to that.
Tomorrow night, Eastwood Town Center, there's a very interesting author going to be in town. It's Peter Benjamin. He covers Motown. He's for a long time. He's written a book of history of Motown. He's got a new book out about Mary Wells. He was saying my and that was the first big thing.
Now, where will you be?
It's going to be at Eastwood Shores, 17th.
Oh, good. Okay. But it's a cold, and
I'm going to go out there. see it happen. I'm anxious to see them. I love them now. And if you go to Nick and Liv, I think they haven't put it on Lansing online now. Nick and Liv has got an article about the book, but also something I found which I didn't know, that Chrysler this year has got a limited edition Chrysler 300 Motown.
Did you have a picture of that?
Yeah, and I've got the Barry Gordy ad that probably will run during the Super Bowl as well.
Oh.
It was pretty interesting. It's a playoff game.
It's
pretty cool.
Oh, that'll be
I have to
cool.
admit.
Oh, wow.
They weren't so expensive.
How much?
I think they probably started around 38.
I guess that's right on. But they do those full commercials, Chrysler does every year, so this year we can go around that.
I hope so. They haven't revealed it yet. But you can watch the ad. It's online already. But that's become some of the new trends.
We have a Minnesota one. This is someone who we ad, and this is really he's got the one that's a fashionista daughter.
Yes.
Really good for that one, too. But I did take my trusty camera out on Saturday myself and go to a special event. I went down to the Capitol for Beneficiation Day, and I'm lucky to be here to tell the tale. I kept confronting people and asking them why they needed those guns, and maybe they could take it into their hobby, and all of these kinds of things. And I've got a few people that were a little bit, riled with me, as you will see on the video. But I guess what interested me was listening to one of the speakers on the Capitol steps talk about all the rights that they have gained since 9/11. He talked about the culmination last 2 years ago when he was able to take his assault weapon into the Capitol open carry. And I thought, I hadn't realized they're talking about protecting the Second Amendment, but what they really been doing is making great strides from their perspective in additional gun freedoms, being able to take their guns into all sorts of other public places. Being able to, the records have just been expanding dramatically, the size of the magazines and the size of the clips that print around these guns and allowing them in different places. So it hasn't been a static set of laws, it's actually been an expanding set of laws. And to be honest with you, they're really on the muscle.
Well, the Lansing Public Library,
yes,
a lawsuit is going to move to the Supreme Court. The appeals court reversed the local decision that said you can't carry something.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah. And they're pushing that case. It's going to be a test case, and I hope it gets paid. There's a couple that I interviewed that I found kind of oddly compelling. He had what I thought was a sawed-off shotgun on his hip. It turns out it's not sawed-off, but it's made that way. It's a short shotgun with a barrel that screws in. And she's carrying, Mom is carrying, an AK-57 across her chest. And that's sort of the de rigueur fashion for the gun set.
Pretty homey, wasn't it?
It was,
I thought
yeah.
it was really nice.
And when I asked him how many other guns they had, he got really hot.
I think they had a lot.
I think they do too. They got quite an arsenal.
I talked to someone at a party Saturday night that had several hundred cannons.
Okay.
I don't know.
It seems I'd kind of like to know one.
Several
Does he
hundred.
have an army that we don't know about?
That's a lot of guns to have.
It certainly is, especially when you think that most of the people down there were talking about taking arms against the government. In fact, when you listen to some of the claims made on the tape, they say it's very close to sedition, if not treason, saying, let's grab our guns and go get them, kind of thing. It seems to be in some cases what I call a call to arms literally. But I keep wondering, Lansing, LPD has a tank. If your local police department has a tank, I don't care if you've got an AK-47, you're still going to be a wet spot on the sidewalk about the time that you actually take up arms against anybody. I don't know what signal are they expecting? Are they going to run out?
Black helicopters.
Black helicopters.
It's hard not to make fun of something.
I know.
Because they are so serious.
Till they shoot you.
Yes. And I think everyone should go look at that video. It's very instructive. And I just have the one question. Did you feel that after doing this, that the only thing that stopped the bad guy with the gun was the guy with the gun? Were you more comfortable?
No, actually, I was very uncomfortable. I'll tell you why. It's not because I thought they were bad guys, but when the one guy tripped on going up the steps of the Capitol, I was really glad that he wasn't the one that had the gun in his hip. Because as we saw at the gun show where I was on Saturday, 5 different people were shot in different incidents. Not intentionally by malice, but because of accidental vegetables.
Somebody told me the story of a Bay City security guard in school. He dropped his gun in the men's room. Didn't notice it. It was turned in, and sort of the punchline was he wasn't loaded.
Oh.
But I mean, it's just people do drop their guns more than people think.
I know. I mean, that's what makes me nervous about these people whipping around with their guns.
I particularly like the younger man who got his guns with the class rank for high school graduate. He's a high school and college.
He was high school. And he spends a lot of time, he told me, playing video games. So he's sort of an endangered species. They're going to come at him from everywhere like that. He's in the basement with the gun with the video games.
Some of those I mentioned in the spouse when we were watching it, they're taking down some of these people's range. They're a little over the top. It's amazing. You know, somebody else at the party on Saturday, pointed out to me, in a positive way, what is the purpose of a bushmaster in the gun range? You could shoot off $200 worth of ammunition in 20 minutes.
Really?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that aspect. Those bullets are expensive.
I bet they are.
They cost you $3 a bullet.
Oh my goodness.
Shooting.
The hard part that I had was editing the video camera because I didn't show the guy tripping on the steps. I just thought that would be a cheap shot. Later I thought,
I'm sorry.
I mean, there was so much crazy going on in their building. It was hard to know. So they're going to have a big rally on February 8th. I'm going to go back down there. The only thing is, I think there'll be a giant target on my back hole because the comments on the YouTube site made me a little bit nervous to see them know who the old lady is. What's she up to? Somebody thinks I'm an agent provocateur, and I thought, yeah, like the government would have you. So, one of the things, this is going to be a clumsy segue, but an important one, Bill. We're going to talk a little bit right now about the inauguration today. And I was quite impressed. It was an interesting speech that the president gave.
I listened to it afterwards. I didn't listen to it. He should speak like that all the time.
Yeah.
He was very good.
It sounded more like the State of the State was laying out an agenda. I was surprised at that. But the line that caught me, and the one that segues into the how we'll be spending the balance of the show, is that he made a reference to Seneca, Selma, and Stonewall. And it was an interesting reference, and I'm going to be interested to ask my students tomorrow to see if they know what any of the three references refer to, because I'm not sure. I mean, I was finding out from them the other day there were 6 when 9/11 happened. So it's a little bit difficult. They didn't live through these things, so they don't know them.
So these are the students I'm speaking to on Thursday.
Yes, they are. Keep in mind, they're 6 years old. Seneca, of course, refers to the Women's Convention in Seneca Falls, New York. And then they talk about Selma, Alabama, where March on Pettus Ridge, probably the seminal moment of the civil rights movement in terms of galvanizing public opinion and big comment really in which the jobs and the marchers. And then it was Stonewall, which I think in Greenwich Village, which was when people of the LGBT community was finally fed up with police harassment, and they made a stand. A very courageous thing there. I had a number of good friends in that room who were terrorized by the police. And those three, for him to mention those three, that 3 essays, I thought was really just a one. We're joined tonight by Mary Collin from Michigan now. We're joined also by Dr. Matt Olsrud, and he's with ACOG, which is the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and also by Renee Chelian, who runs Northern Family Practice down by Family Planning, down by, where is that located?
3 clinics in the
3 clinics in the Detroit suburbs. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about the past, sort of present, and future of what's been happening with the women's movement. And I thought I'd ask you, Mary, when they make that Seneca Falls reference, what did you think when you heard that?
I did it right on. And I immediately posted it on Facebook, Michigan Now's Facebook page, because to me, it was recognizing 3 great civil rights movements in this country.
Yeah.
And the fact that they haven't had S's, that's great too.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But 1848 Seneca Falls Convention, and I thought to myself later in the day, those women who met there and declared, the right to be free and to have liberty and to vote. And that was their goal, and it took until 1919 to achieve it. Freedom of choice in reproductive lives has taken a long time also. And it's going to continue to take more time to solidify it. So And then ERA, we haven't got that passed yet. So there's a lot of progress that's been made, but still lots of work to do.
We think back to Elizabeth Cady Stanton, some of the names from that Congress. I think there was always when we talk about the civil rights movement, there were tensions back in that era as to will women get the vote. What about elected black officials, elected women officials? There's always been these tensions, who will be first.
Well, the first wave of feminists were very much abolitionists.
Yes.
And they were into the temperance movement as well.
Responsible partially for prohibition.
Yeah.
And so, and then later the suffrage movement kind of split.
Yeah.
And on tactical issues about how to express activism. One wanted to work within the system, and one wanted to do demonstrations and changing self-defenses and that kind of thing.
We also had Margaret Sanger, who grew out of that movement, and she was an interesting character. She was trying to get the right to contraception for women to be able to have access to contraception, women and men.
And that was, I was reading today. I had gotten this. It was 1972, the year before Roe v. Wade, that unmarried women, like myself, got the right to contraception. They outlawed it. The Supreme Court ruled in 1972. In 1965, I went to a doctor, lied about my name and my marital status in order to get some contraception. And I'm sure he detected that I wasn't married.
It was that kind of era, though, when you really had to be afraid that somebody was going to call you out on these things.
It was illegal.
Yeah.
And what he was doing was illegal.
This is LCC Radio, WLNV 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Mary Pollack, and we're rewinding your memories of
Well, which era?
Well, we don't go back to Seneca Falls. We can't get back that
I
side.
do know Bill Hillard, who prepared his allotted that gave the women the right to birth control.
Oh, really?
And Bill got arrested for holding up a sign in a college campus with different methods of birth control. And that case, he won, and it established the right to privacy, which is the basis of Roe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was an important and pretty amazing case. So then and now, I think that young women think that abortion rights are secure and that they'll never lose them. They'll always figure out a way to get one. And when we talk to them about the possibility of losing the right, they have said things to me like, well, we'll just go back to using cocaine, just like our grandmothers did. There's no connection that women die or that they can harm themselves, only that abortions were done by cocainers. And then, of course, there's the antis who say, well, before Roe, there were never any abortions. That if you made abortion illegal, it would stop all abortions, and that would be the end, which, of course, is a huge lie. So I think we still have a lot of education to do.
My aunt, who was severely alcoholic, performed 11 abortions in herself. And she used many drugs most of the time. And she perforated her intestine at one time. She set the semen and almost died. Sometimes she was able to get somebody who would give her help, but there were times where she was just desperate. And those are the kinds
All of those times, I would say, would be desperate.
But I mean, it's hard to remember that era and how. And one of the things that was so secret, people didn't talk about. Girls went away for a while and then came back, and they were a little thinner than when they left. And it was either that they had an abortion or they went off to a home to give birth to a child up for adoption. It was so rough on them because birth control was so imperfect.
Or unavailable.
Or unavailable.
Birth control was not available until the 60s.
Absolutely. I was first in line at the pharmacy when they came out. It was a remarkable difference in people's lives. Very liberating. But it was a terrible era. And women really, I think, it was an indicator of how little power they had that we were silent for so long. I mean, the 50s, people, friends of mine, they loved Happy Days. They loved to watch those little, shows on TV that memorialize the 50s as a great old time. A lot of conservatives talk about how great it would be to go back to those good old days of the 50s. They were horrible for women.
I went to the doctor, I got married in January 72, and I went to the doctor in 73. The doctor who was the head of medicine at Wayne State University, and this was a big shot doctor, and I went to get an IUD, and he told me, "Mary, I think you should have a baby until 75. I was 22 years old and left in Philo. And today, my daughters would never stand for that, but the times were very different. And this doctor told me to go home and have a baby. I've been married a year.
Well, I graduated from high school in 1962, and to give you an idea about the attitudes back then, I was tied academically for first place in Jackson High with 580 students in the class. They went all the way up to sixth grade. I couldn't find a difference between me and another student, a young man who was on the national in. And then one day the principal called me and he said, well, we've made our decision. We've taken a look at both of your records, and your records are indeed identical. We can't find any difference in your age and straight A all the way going back. But we're going to make him the valedictorian, and you'll just be listed in second place. I said, why not a tie? And I said, well, it'll matter so much more to him because you're just going to have babies and you're just going to stay home, and he's going to go on and have a career, and it'll do him some good. And that was sort of, it was sort of that instant radicalization, you know. Ms. Magazine wrote an article years ago about that hit movement.
Yes.
And all of a sudden they went, It's kind of like sometimes after Thanksgiving where they say, and now the guys will retire to the living room to watch football and the women will do the dishes. And it's another one of those hit moments. Yes. Yeah. But this is life and death. This isn't just being consulted or demeaned. This is life and death.
Women's lives. Women died from medical abortions, and or were impaired.
I remember when I was in college in the 70s, I was a senior. A friend, who spoke with a friend, asked me to help take her friend down to Detroit for abortions. Got pregnant, and wanted to deliver, so we went down there. First I was, back room kind of thing, and I was surprised how little time it took. Then when we came back, we started hemorrhaging. And that continued for much longer than it should, and she was close to death. She didn't want to go to Pentagon campus. That was my escape from mine. It's pretty exciting. And the strange thing is I can remember it.
You remember the story?
Oh, I remember the story like it was yesterday. The other woman that was with us does too.
I did illegal abortion defense before 1973. I was an assistant dean of students at the University of Illinois, and I was involved with the small loan program for $100 to buy books and things like that. They paid back no interest for 6 months or so. But I got involved with the clergy counseling service, and that was the big conduit for information. They had the long distance number of folks who were doing illegal abortions.
The clergy?
Yes, clergy. That's the first clergy I've ever run across who I liked and respected and was doing good things. And because they had confidentiality, they were legally protected.
I see. Oh, that's interesting.
And of course, these were certain denominations. Methodist, Unitarian, those kind of folks. And I was the money person. These were for college students mostly. And then I was doing, because I was getting all these kids with abortions, I went out and started doing sex education on my own, going to dorms and telling people, the minute the parents left on Sunday of moving day, I put up signs. Condoms and foam, 99% effective. And
did that ever cause any conflict in your job? Did you get?
Well, yes. My boss, a lot older than I, had lunch with me, and she knew what I was doing, and she told me that she started the lunch out with a story about working in a small college in Kentucky and finding an aborted baby in a garbage can. That I don't know if it was aborted, but it was a student who had a child all by herself. Had this baby.
I still don't know.
Yep, and then threw it away. And of course she got it all involved in that. And she, as being a woman there, and she kind of let me know that she knew I was doing this. And but the health center director said to me, send all the women to me immediately when they return because antibiotics. Then I got to know the insurance guy, and he said, all I need is a prescription pad with DNC written on it and a signature. He didn't tell me, you know, it needed to be official or anything. So we found a way to get reimbursement for the students through their student insurance. So, but they, you know, the minute...
That was rare, Mary.
Well, I know.
Were lucky.
They were very.
But they used to, you know, they were, they needed counseling about this, but for two reasons. One, about the morality, ethical considerations, but two, the criminality of it.
Yes.
And as soon as it was legalized, the criminality went away. There was still the morality, ethical consideration, but really the counseling part of it went down considerably in terms of the time spent talking about the risk that these people were taking.
Yeah.
And I was so young, I was in my early 20s, just out of grad school, and I had no idea about the risk for myself. I just thought I was doing the right thing. And I know some of Renee's background, you know, she's taken a lot of risks in her career, in her life. And when you're young, you just don't know what the consequences could be. And the issue seemed important to me.
Oddly enough, I think the level of scrutiny now is so incredible we would not
Get away with
Yeah,
it.
not get away with it. I guess.
I feel bad when it's not what I'm saying, but I wanted
Well,
to add something.
yeah.
Mary, I mean, I had another abortion when I was 15, and my dad took me because my mother was 6 months pregnant with my older sister. And our biggest fear was getting caught because then you go to jail. I mean, I didn't worry about dying. I'm sure my parents spent a lot of time worrying about dying, but I would have risked my life to have a chance to receive a chance. Because at 15 in 1966, girls were going to school, and you never knew that. But and that was something that March was on to, that the news that was young and was afraid to get involved in health center because she was afraid her parents would find out. The bigger fear was the police. My husband was an ex-police officer, and one of the worst kinds of places that he had to go to was a hospital where a woman was dying or very sick and very infected, and the police were expected to interrogate this man as well as anybody else about where they had an abortion, who did it, all of the details, and it didn't matter how sick they were.
And that is a case where those people are also facing murder charges. I mean, it really is. I mean, when you think about it, Dr. Elson, were there brave doctors that, when I was young, it was still the doctor in town who might do this, and the word would be out if you needed it. But it was often among the more active people, it seemed to me, that they might have connections because their parents might have a social relationship with a doctor. Who were the people who were willing to risk a license plate?
That's a very good question. The time is right here. I was 7 years old, I think, when came in. I was still learning about it. But knowing some people who, the people who felt that their conscience rose above the law.
There were doctors, and through the National Abortion Federation, which I've been a member of since it started in the 80s, because I've been a provider since Roe. Before Roe, I was in New York. But there are still doctor members who provided their own abortions and have really great stories to tell about why. A few of them are Army physicians, and they were, in the Army hospital. It was small, there was a network, and they were able to take care of women and say it was a DNC. A lot of them risked their license. George Stiller, the doctor from Wichita who was murdered, found out that his father had been, when his father died, when he was trying to sell his practice, women were coming and asking him to do abortions. Which is when George found out that his father had been doing abortions, and he started off. Sometimes doctors do the right things in spite of the law.
Yes.
Our family doctor wouldn't give me a referral, but he certainly was willing to take care of me because I was going to die. If I hadn't gotten the medications that I got from him, I might have been killed, I might have died.
Well, there were people who had no medical training who were also doing this.
Oh, yeah, I
And it
remember
was
doing
so
my abortion.
risky. Obviously there was no way that you could check credentials or be sure that that person really had the training.
You didn't ask me
No,
questions.
just so thankful to be able to find somebody who did.
I think every family, if they would discuss it, has an abortion story.
Yeah.
Because 1 out of 3 women have an abortion before the age of 45. It's a common medical procedure that women experience. And so every family has these stories. And when I look at these men in the legislature that are testifying, I often use that statistic, 1 out of 3. And I like to say, every family has these stories, if you would but ask. And they have stories about birth control, the failure of birth control, the lack of access to birth control, children, pregnancies that were unwanted, ill-timed, caused enormous problems for the family and others.
Children with severe defects that won't survive.
But there's always been an exception to this special. I testified before the United States Congress on the partial abortion issue, and one of the guys who went after me the biggest, I knew his wife had 3 abortions, and I couldn't say anything, wouldn't have said anything, I still would never say his name. But that's the hypocrisy.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ, 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I guess one of the things that has always bothered me is it does seem, conservatives finally figured out, I think, that many of them have a gay person in the family, so now their attitudes are changing. Maybe if they heard some of the abortion stories in their families, but you're telling me that they have the abortion stories, but they still choose to block that out.
Well, they often say, my daughter is different and special. She's not a slut like you know the rest of us. I say, well, you don't really know the story of the others. So, in the clinic, it's, for me, the most difficult patient is the one who presents that she doesn't believe in abortion. She's the most difficult, not the most difficult patient to see, the most difficult person for me to deal with, because we have a really good simple philosophy. If somebody doesn't, we have a triage form that we use, because of course we want to do it as part of our counseling. We want to know where someone's at emotionally, how they think they're going to handle an abortion afterwards. And if somebody says they don't believe in abortion, they think they should be able to go, we refuse to do abortion.
Oh.
And you cannot believe how many of those people have said, you have to do that. Surprisingly, we're a government agency. This is a private practice. No, we don't have to. Here's the phone book cards on yours.
That must be a surprise.
To them.
I guess.
Well, because they think that we turn the patient away.
Well, I've seen the cases where anybody who is an abortion provider is portrayed as part of the 1%, right? Because you're making so much money and you're a mercenary. You have no stake in this. I mean, that's really unfortunately the way that abortion providers are portrayed, which I think is so unfair. I mean, my doctor did them, but they made it almost impossible for local physicians to do it.
Pretty much. I mean, harassment.
How many of them? What's the story on that? Because I know that my family physician used to do them in his office on Saturday mornings, but the pressure, I think, got so great and fear.
Well, there is a lot of social pressure, and some patients who want to have them both ways, and want to have them all as the healthcare have access to what makes it easier to get that this law,
Tactics of intimidation and harassment work because landlords don't want to keep us in the buildings.
Yeah.
And private practices with a higher physician don't want pickers coming to their office and chasing all their patients away. So doctors who would be committed to doing abortions can't. They're unable to. They're losing hospital privileges depending on whether they're in a city or in a rural area. If in a rural area, they're not paying out very well. And even in the city, doctors finish their residency if they want to do abortions. Private practices or hospitals that they work for make it practically impossible. Although I've been meeting a new generation of young physicians who are in their looking for jobs, and they're seeking them out, and they're, I'll only come to work for you if I can provide, I'll work part-time or quarter-time for you, and I want to provide abortions. And I've recently had two young doctors start working for us who made that a condition of their employment with their other job.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm hearing that go around the country, so I feel very encouraged that these young women and men are putting their foot down and saying, we're not going to see the aging out of abortion providers if we're not getting access. So there's definitely some encouragement there.
When we talk about past, present, and future, I think about when the decision came down Roe v. Wade. I remember just being stunned. Apparently I wasn't paying attention, but it was even being debated about when that decision was going to come. And I was so excited because it seemed to me that made it settled ground. We were already in the era where supposed states' rights were going to solve everything, and New York allowed it, but this they couldn't, and women were constantly engineering, how can I get to this state in time? Sherry Finkbein had gone all the way to Sweden at this point, and she wrote up her experience. She got death threats, but we thought, well, finally, we've now taken a stand, we're a modern country. But then it seems like ever since then we've seen it chipping away in terms of access. Where are we now, Mary? How many, if a woman in Michigan needs these services, can she easily find them in her home community?
Well, I think medical abortions, which are pills, basically, are probably more readily available through a local OB/GYN clinic. But not in every county. I've looked at the statistics of which this gathers, and not every county has someone who can do medical abortions, even surgical. And in surgical, I think now we're down to what is estimated to be 30 clinics, although, I don't think the reporting is entirely accurate. I just got a message today that the Stephen Orville was closed, but was not reporting accurately. So, we can trust those figures. We've got about 23,000 abortions occurring in Michigan in 2008.
I think, maybe yours is something different. I'm not seeing quite a lot of people like this before.
I think there are some, but I don't think they publicize it. I think they do it
For their own patients.
So you couldn't go and look them up and find one. You'd have to go to the doctor and then
have a relationship.
There's something in the new law that says if a doctor's practice or clinic does 120 abortions or more a year and publicly advertises and holds themselves out as doing abortions, then they have to apply for a license.
meet those new standards that are passed.
So what I'm seeing is that I've offered that we'll do the advertising for them. So that they can do more than 120 a year and not have to go.
But Michigan now will do the advertisement, so if they don't do
But
it,
if they do 120,
No, this says and.
not all.
And, not or.
It's a big difference.
Yes, big difference in law. And so this is the way that we can get around that one. But, they'll come back and close that whole thing. They are just real clever about all this stuff. Relentless, positive. Clever about
Didn't
it.
they close the telemedicine option?
For 5 years.
Okay, and that means that it used to be that you could go in and through a Skype arrangement.
How
nobody in
much-
Michigan was doing
I
that.
wonder how much telemedicine is going
Few
on in
states.
For
Michigan.
abortion, in Michigan, I don't think they're doing
Only a few states in the country are doing telemedicine.
So it's not a real loss in Michigan.
Where would, say, someone in a real rural area,
Minnesota,
Okay.
or have to drive all the way down to Saginaw.
so, I mean, this is where it's real.
It's concentrated in metropolitan. The providers are
That's what I
concentrated in metropolitan areas. So women in Michigan still have to travel. They don't have to travel as far as particularly a state like Texas, but only because of the size. And with the 24-hour laws and all of the laws that are put out, a woman has to get certain information from either the internet or have it faxed to her, mailed to her at least 24 hours before she can be taking an abortion. And with so many people using mobile devices now, we still have women claiming every day who haven't printed off the materials in the right time. And when you print them off the internet, there's a date and time stamp on it. So if you've traveled, you've arranged childcare, taken the day off work, you're still not able to get your abortion that day, which is the intention. Just have the woman delay.
That's a Michigan law.
Yeah.
Informed consent is also part of that 24-hour waiting period.
Well, it's state mandated information. It's not informed consent. It's state
Right,
mandated.
exactly. That's the thing that I find so duplicitous, is that we have a lot of these religious leaders who are claiming more righteousness in this, but the laws that they're passing, but they don't even pay lip service to the idea that they're really doing it for the improvement or the betterment of the woman herself. They're really designed to put up obstacles to just make it difficult to have any access to it, or to make it economically difficult.
Well, if you look at the rules that have been in place since 78, it's 5711 just changes when you
Yeah.
ask to get licensed. There, they have to do only with physical, not anything to do with patient care. In fact, all we heard our senators talk about and debate was cleanliness of clinics. I've gone over those rules with my attorneys. There is nothing about cleanliness, not one rule. This is designed to make it more difficult for clinics to stay open, that if we have to spend more money to knock down walls to make the doorway wider or a hallway wider, that the cost of an abortion is going to go up and then we may not be able to get abortions. We have offered to work, I have offered to work for the last 30 years with the legislature on standards like that, those that are passed that the National Abortion Federation standards that members have to adhere to, that have to do with medical care for women. Those would go a long way to improving the health and safety of women. These rules do nothing. They're aimed at shutting down abortion clinics. And I want to just add, there is no public health crisis with the rules and regulations that we have now or don't have in place. Abortion is the safest surgical procedure done in this country.
Safer than liposuction.
Oh, safer than a shot of penicillin.
Well, that shot of penicillin is good.
Well, you should get one.
Exactly, yeah.
What's the position of the American Congress on this? What do they do actively
To support.
Well, the American Congress is in a position of recognizing that members should have the right to choose, have certain and we expect and value all our members. With that said, not only on the outright erroneous bases and terminology that is going to interfere with the practicing mindset well beyond abortion standpoint, but also the unintended consequences. And particularly meaningful for us this year is the fact that we have a expectation of workforce in Michigan.
Right.
We're already understaffed with
And the best young doctors in our country.
exactly. We've got study of abortion service attitudes among physicians. Many women were just out of training.
What's on the horizon? I mean, I think in some ways, there was an era in which we were seeing more doctors being needed and more clinics being hired. We seem to have seen somewhat of a diminution in the clinic. Is it getting better?
Well, George Tiller was only murdered a few years ago.
Yeah.
The violence, the worst part of violence has gone down since the years ago was passed. But we still get threats all the time. My family lives with alarms on our cars, our home, on the corners, with security cameras. We practice the tightest security in the place that you could possibly imagine, including whatever comes in the mail. If there's no return address, if there's anything suspicious. My husband and I spent the night, one night last January, in our parking lot with the police and bomb squad because there was someone on our roof and the police had concerns about the bomb. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But there are threats of violence all over. We live in the state.
Rachel Maddow has been doing a wonderful series of shows on MSNBC. She's focusing on the 4 states that are down to 1 point, and if Mississippi is released or not prevented, it will be 0 points in Mississippi. The first case where a state, I mean, look at this law if it says you have a right to something but you can't exercise the right. It's making
That's
it's not
the
that
goal of the
people
anti-abortion movement now. They've made that very clear, that they are going to look at doing anything they can to regulate clinics out of existence.
Right.
Because it's not about health and safety anymore. It's about making abortion access impossible.
this year you have to have your windows 3 feet from the floor. Next year it will have to be 2 feet from the floor. And you have to go back and redo the windows you want. I mean, these are the kinds of tactics that are being used so that they can go to the public and pretend that they're being sane about this. They're just concerned about women, wanting to make sure that they have appropriate facilities, when in reality it's designed to eliminate action.
Look, they purposely named these laws to be something misleading.
Yes.
The state mandated information law is called the Women's Right to Know Bill, and the 2 partial birth abortion cases that we won in court had other names. And certainly, if they were just going to pass a law banning partial birth abortion, since I don't know anyone who's ever done one, and certainly not anybody in the state, we would have been fine. Pass it, done with it. But when you actually read the language of the law, it virtually banned all abortions. It wasn't about the pictures that they showed and the name partial birth abortion that they said they were going to ban. When you read the language of the law, we would have been through the place, which is why the child was so another form of harassment.
And it was
It's mandating doctors to give speeches or read something.
We already have to do that.
But, having somebody else
more.
do it, not a
Yeah.
doctor, having to do it. It's just ridiculous stuff.
Well, the doctor actually, we not only have to give that in speech and then have the patient get all the information prior to doing the abortion, the doctor, for a non-Michigan, has to give another speech. We already have 6 or 7 laws in Michigan that are just designed to be another step.
equally pregnant to me is that the access to contraception is becoming an issue. If you really want to prevent abortions, one of the ways to do that is to make it easy for women to have access to much needed contraception, and that's what the American Care Act, the Affordable Care Act, is designed to do. But there's this whole new round of laws now where it's supposedly infringing on a physician or any kind of healthcare provider's personal religious conscience views if they do not have to dispense certain kinds of medications or participate in certain kinds of medical procedures. And that seems to be another area. Isn't that maybe a nightmare for doctors? The doctor next to you won't do the things you will do?
Well, that's an area that's more going to challenge physicians and their understanding of their professional ethics. Our professional ethics compel us not to treat people the way that we would choose to be treated, but the way that they would choose to be treated. And that's a really challenging gap for many of us. The American realize that for decisions that make them responsible.
Don't have to participate in abortion or anything to do with abortion. And clinics that I run, doctors would actually fly to their patients and tell them they're not pregnant and stop them from having an abortion. You know, if you don't believe in abortion, don't have one, but to not give patients accurate information because it's sick. And in terms of birth control, if a woman goes to a physician who refuses to supply her with a prescription for birth control, I wish she would act as a consumer and find another doctor. But the 5711 and the related bills that are designed to close down clinics that do abortion, we prescribe birth control for every person we see. We do more to stop abortions than anybody in this state.
That's true.
And we never, ever get credit for that.
You know, one of the things that concerns me too is, I'm not clear, Mary, how did you ever let that happen in the past? Because it seems to me that that's caused nothing but grief since that.
Well, that's the ban on federal funding,
Yeah.
which mostly is, it's been around 25 years or so.
I think that's true.
67, I believe.
Was this the idea that if the feminists gave sort of a sock to the right on that one, they go?
Well, I think they have, the Democrats, even now we have like 15% of elected Democrats and they have no choice. So, Democrats and Republicans combined were able to pass that amendment to prohibit federal money to be used. And then the idea of prohibiting taxpayer money to fund this healthcare need that one-in-3 women will have spread. And now the idea is spreading to insurance policies.
Yes.
And the next, our Senate, Michigan Senate, passed in December a ban on abortion coverage in health insurance. And over 70% of policies now cover abortion. But if those conservatives in the Senate and House in Michigan have their way and the governor signs it, it will take that away from coverage. And, you don't know what you're going to need. Well, early it's maybe not so expensive, but
there's
later.
something more, I think. I mean, first of all, we should say that the governor put that bill.
Well, that's the
And
cost bill,
the
but there's a standalone bill that passed the
Yes,
Senate.
that's correct. But if you look at the history, what started with the Hyde Amendment were people who think, mostly men, if you take away abortion funding for poor women, they're not going to get abortions anymore, which didn't happen. They sold their food stamps, they didn't pay their electric bills, they didn't pay their house bill, their mortgage, have their mortgage, their rental payments to pay for an abortion. So their kids went without food. Then they went after minors because they said, here's another segment. They can't get abortions, then there'll be less abortions. It didn't really change a whole lot. Then they went after, started passing all the informed consent bills, as if women knew they were going to have a baby, they wouldn't have an abortion. They'd never have an abortion. Well, of course women know they're going to have a baby if they don't have an abortion, but during that testimony, there were women walking around the Capitol wearing T-shirts that said WIBA, Women Exploited by Abortion, and they actually testified that if they would have known that they were going to have a baby when they were pregnant, they never would have had an abortion. And please tell me, what kindergartner could you ask when they see a pregnant woman, what's going to happen? A kindergartner would know you're going to have a baby. And every one of these laws is somehow some misguided anti-abortion person believing if you just put up one more obstacle, women won't have an abortion. So we have a law that says we have to offer them the right or the opportunity to view their ultrasound and have a picture, as though that was going to stop women. Women are not stupid, and we trust them. But these people do not trust women at all. They think that they're stupid and they don't know that if they were going to have a baby, if they don't know that they're pregnant, they're going to have a baby if they don't have an abortion. Women choose abortion after making careful, thoughtful, moral decisions about whether or not it's the right time for them to bring a new life into the world, and whether or not they can raise another child, because half of the patients that we see for abortions already have children. Every one of these laws is designed to just make it mandatory access. And for women,
Is there something you think that the other side, your side, have done to waylay this? I mean, was there a turning point that started moving anti-abortion?
they have so much
Money, part of that's the money.
And they
too.
attacked us politically. They was ton of money raised. They have the churches, and women didn't think that abortion was going to be an issue anymore. And then they went after providers. Who were pretty smart on their part. There aren't that many of us. Kill us, shoot us, threaten our lives, take away the doctors. You don't need both. You don't need legal abortion because there won't be anybody to provide it, which is exactly what's happening in those four states that are turning out as highway.
One of the things that really disappoints me is what good does it do to elect Democrats, especially federal level, if they don't come in and protect it? I mean, they really, I couldn't harass anybody that would leave them harassed.
No, I couldn't.
And I don't understand why it is that there's this double standard, that there's this idea that, I guess it's that they view abortion still as squeamish. Even if they say they're pro-choice, they're still squeamish about it, and they don't want to be too vocal in pushing back.
This election cycle, we saw a real turn in that because Obama ran on it, and we saw two senators, frankly, they were going to be Republican seats in the U.S. Senate, turn on Murdoch and Aiken. They said things about rape and abortion that were very much opposed by most of the electorate, and they didn't win. And these were going to be Senate seats for Republicans. So I think the Republicans now know they need to get a different narrative on at least the rape issue and abortion.
And I don't know if the Democrats, to say, how could the Democrats do that? I don't know any human being can do it. Women should be able to decide their own destiny. And the Republicans, the Tea Party, the conservative Republicans, their party has just been captured. We saw when the Democrats tried to make a party of only pro-choice candidates that they had some losses. And I don't think we're going to see the Democratic Party ever say that it's going to be a closed count. There should be room for people to have different views. The problem is they're voting on laws that affect all women, and they don't think twice about it. There are people, I stood outside the gallery the night that 5711 was voted on, and I just watched endless people come out. They hadn't read the bill. They had no idea what it said, and they didn't care. They were just told by Michigan Right to Life to vote a certain way. But I think the tide is turning. I think we saw women come out this year in ways that they haven't through social media, on Facebook, signing petitions, tweeting, for their voices to be heard. They're not going to go back.
Mary, you also said we should probably, and this will hurt me to say this, we should put in a good word for the governor.
I think we should. Governors, over there we have a problem on the other end of the table here with that. But
declare victory and move on, eh?
Frankly, he's the one who said, I don't like the original 5711. I don't want to see a 20-week ban on abortions based on pain of the fetus.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be protections for women, safety and stuff, and we have to get better language here. So his people worked on cleaning up some of the language in 5711. And he vetoed the Blue Cross bill that had, at the last minute, inserted this ban on insurance coverage. And Blue Cross has 71% of the market, so that, he wanted a clean Blue Cross bill. Yeah. Well, he's going to get a clean Blue Cross bill probably next week. But they're going to do this standalone ban on insurance, and that will be a test for him. Will he keep his word on the veto message where he said, I think this is an interference with business operations of insurance companies to ban a whole, area of insurance. And he also said he widened his stance on a ban on abortion from his pre-election ban that except for the life of the mother, rape, and incest. He expanded that to health of the mother. So he's listening to his lawyers who told him that Roe and Casey, the subsequent case, you have to have a health of the mother exception in anything you do that's going to mess around with abortion rights.
Well, I guess we should be thankful.
We have sued the state. Northland Family Planning has been a plaintiff for the last 20 years. We have sued the state on every piece of anti-abortion legislation. And our attorneys have won back almost $2 million in attorney fees that the states had to pay, not to mention how much it costs for lawmakers for them to spend the time that they spend on these bills and to defend them. And we end up with settlements that actually make the law something that we can live with.
Renee,
It's a
I wanna
waste of
thank you so
taxpayer
much
dollars.
for coming down tonight from the Detroit area. Renee Chelian and Mary Pollock of Michigan Now and Dr. Matt Allsweed of ACOG. And thank you so much. This hour's gone so fast we should have made it a 2-hour show tonight. Thank you so much. 40th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. Tune in next week at 7 o'clock. Thank you.